thanks for joining us for the latest All In Skills podcast. All In Skills is a soon-to-be-launched platform designed for young people, undergraduates, recent graduates, people new in the job market, to connect with experts, people with experience, people including my guest today, Richard Tobias. Hello, Richard. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
Very good. Richard, you have a very successful business called Impart. Can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do at Impart?
Yes, absolutely. So as you said, Colin, my name is Richard Tobias. I'm a director and founder at Impart, been with the business now for about 12 years. Can't believe how quickly it's gone. And basically, we help organisations win large contracts. So that's normally through the form of procurement, formal tender submissions across a whole range of different sectors and industries.
So you're not limited to one particular industry?
No. Roots originally were in the healthcare space, and I suppose there's a bit of a backstory to how we ended up there. But we very quickly chose to diversify, and now we work across every sector. We work on contracts that are worth anything from, so we're based in the UK, anything from £100,000, and I think one last year we were involved in was worth about 4 billion. So yeah, quite a spread.
So you started in the healthcare sector. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Give some context for those who are listening who aren't familiar with the National Health Service. What is it, and how did you get involved in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose going back to the very early part of my career, I ended up working in the IT industry as a sales professional. This was sort of back in the day where they actually spent a lot of time developing and training their staff. So I had extensive training around consultative selling, various skills around building relationships with clients, building up a rapport with them and maybe influencing them, educating them. Any good salesperson, possibly manipulating them slightly. During that work, I was predominantly focused on public sector, in particular healthcare. So in the UK, a lot of people are probably aware we have the National Health Service, the NHS, which is basically publicly funded healthcare that is free at the point of care for the public that are using those services. I think as of now, they're spending, getting on for about £200 billion a year on the NHS, and within the NHS there's a number of individual healthcare providers called NHS trusts that all have dedicated budgets that they then choose to spend on obviously providing healthcare and various supporting services such as IT and so on. So the early part of my career was actually selling IT solutions and services into the NHS. I'd worked for a range of IT outsourcers, business process outsourcers over a number of years. In 2012, they decided to introduce some rather interesting legislation where what they basically did was try to transform the NHS into almost something akin to a free market. The idea that organisations would need to start bidding and winning contracts to provide clinical services. So you had NHS organisations who culturally bidding, selling was completely alien to them, having to compete against private healthcare providers. So I had a bit of a brainwave, and prior to that, I think over the years I've had a few rather wacky brainwaves, but I had this idea that actually NHS organisations would probably benefit from having some assistance in developing sales skills and building up relationships with the people that are awarding these contracts, but actually helping them win these contracts when they go through this formal procurement process. And Impart was born as a result of that, really. So in our early days, we were spending much of our time working on clinical contracts. We're not... Sorry, go on.
Sorry, so your early clients were NHS trusts?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Were purely NHS trusts back in the early days. So huge variety of contracts. It could be cancer services, podiatry services, sexual health services, incredibly diverse. And these contracts could be worth many millions of pounds over many years. And you had a lot of NHS staff who'd spent their whole careers in the NHS genuinely really concerned about the idea of being 2P transferred, so that sort of legal sort of HR legislation about the movement of staff when different organisations win contracts, generally concerned about maybe being transitioned out of the NHS into private providers, really just because it was unknown. So yeah, we were working very closely with these organisations, using their expertise in what they do and obviously their passion, but we were helping them articulate that in a way within the tenders that were allowing them to score highly and ultimately be successful.
So for how long did you work? Almost, it seems in the early days you were working exclusively in the healthcare space. How long was it like that for?
Probably 2 to 3 years. We were working purely in the healthcare space. We did diversify a little bit and work with a few private providers as well. But I mean, something that I've learned throughout my time with Impart is the need for diversification. We were fortunate in that we felt that it would be beneficial to support our growth, that we started looking at other sectors, and then there have been various legislative changes that actually would have driven us down that route anyway, but fortunately we were very proactive around it. I mean, you can tell from looking at me, I'm now of an age where many of my peers are sales directors, chief execs across a whole range of fascinating industries, range of organisations. So reaching out to them, it became very apparent that actually, it wasn't just healthcare organisations that found tendering challenging. Most organisations are not as good as they would like to be. They don't enjoy the level of success that they would like to have when bidding for contracts, because it's a very expensive thing to do. It's weeks of investment for many, many individuals. You end up producing documents that could be many tens of thousands of words. There's a very comprehensive pricing submission that's normally required as well. And if you're only winning 20 or 30% of the bids you're going for, you're effectively wasting 70 or 80% of your efforts. So it's vital for organisations to obviously achieve as much success as they possibly can. And that's where we came in.
So what kind of skills and know-how is the team at Impart bringing to the client? What is it that you're bringing to them that they don't already have within their organisation? Okay,
so I think some organisations, I mean, particularly I think smaller organisations, are normally being created by a founder who's had a fantastic idea or is particularly technical in a particular area and wants to turn that into a business. Normally they've ended up being sort of very hands-on people in what it is they're looking to promote, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are well-rounded business professionals, and certainly doesn't mean that they're any good at writing. I mean, interestingly, I actually studied maths and computing at university, but over the years, because of what I was doing in the early part of my career, that's improved significantly. So what we're doing with these smaller organisations and with these bigger organisations as well is we are helping them articulate what they do in the style that is required to score well in tenders. It's a very different writing style to other areas. It's a bit like sitting exams. There are, a bit like in exams or exam techniques, there are tender techniques around answering the question, addressing the criteria they're going to be using to score it, being very focused on addressing what's been asked within any constraints around content. I mean, we even work with, for example, law firms. So we work with a lot of lawyers, and clearly you'd expect lawyers would be fantastic at writing, and clearly they're very, very good at writing contracts, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're any good at writing tenders. So our expertise in the main is about writing compelling content that is going to be in a very objective manner, very, very high scoring. But because of the broader skills and experience that I have and my co-director Simon has, we've been in the sales environment, in the business environment for many, many years. So we also provide a lot of additional advice and guidance around sales strategy, around other aspects of the process and governance around bidding. So I mean, a really basic example is when an opportunity arises, how do you decide whether to pursue it or not? Or if you're in the fortunate position that you've got 5 amazing opportunities and you've only got capacity to do 3 of them well, how do you pick those 3? Now, is it down to whichever salesperson shouts the loudest? Is it down to whichever's got the biggest financial value associated with it? Or are there some more objective measures to actually align it to the business priorities? So, we help organisations in a whole range of different ways, but the core is very much about writing and reviewing and improving content.
So when you and Simon built out your team, what kind of skills were you looking for in the people that were going to be helping you to help your clients?
So I think this is really interesting. This has evolved over time. We need people that are clearly good at writing. So a lot of the people that we've ended up employing are people that have maybe been at university and been involved or done English degrees, history degrees, philosophy degrees. So they have that experience of writing sort of good narrative. The other thing that's really important is a really inquiring, really inquisitive and challenging mind. Often our customers will produce reasonably good content. Obviously, it varies quite a lot. But one of the skills and the value that we offer is we can look at that narrative and provide some real challenge and feedback on how it can be improved. So we need the skills to look at it in relation to the question, the requirements, the evaluation criteria, and provide really clear guidance on what can be done to further bolster it. So it's not just a case of dealing with a few typos and tidying up the language a little bit. It's about really challenging that content. So having that mindset is vital. And also, as the team has grown, actually cultural compatibility with the wider team is absolutely vital. Sorry, go on, Colin.
Cultural compatibility. Can you just explain what that means in the context of your organization?
Yeah, so we work in a very fluid, dynamic environment. So for most of our clients, when an opportunity arises, there is a turnaround period of 4 to 5 weeks when a whole lot of content needs to be produced and go back and forth between us and them. We agree a timetable, but with best efforts on behalf of our clients, they're not necessarily always able to adhere to that because of a whole range of other pressures. So we're always having to flex and adapt based on when things arrive with us, being able to turn it around quickly and so on. The team setup is very fluid. So whilst our customer may have a primary point of contact for their opportunity, other people in the team are maybe supporting a variety of different opportunities. They're moving from one bid to another. There may be certain pinch points where, for example, if we get 30,000 words arrive in a day, it may well be that one person can work on it and it could take 4 days to turn around. Or we can have 4 people focusing on it and we turn it all around within a day, then allowing the client to spend more time working on it. So there needs to be a really close-knit team. People need to be very supportive of each other, very flexible, very dynamic. Whilst we'd never plan an opportunity to work in this way, there may be occasionally a need to work into an evening, a little bit of work over the weekend because of our clients. And you want the team to want to be supportive and helpful of each other. Liking each other is really, really important. So having not necessarily like-minded people, because we want people that have differing views to challenge each other, but having people that care about each other and want to support and help each other is vital. So that aspect of it, as the team has grown, has become increasingly important.
Let me ask a practical question. Working remote is something that, of course, with COVID really reached a head. What's the situation in your company? Is there a preference in your company that people are present in a space, or is there a certain amount of flexibility when it comes to working remote?
Okay, so as you said, COVID has had a huge impact on it. The beauty of what we do, because we are often reviewing content, writing content, that can be done anywhere. Also, we are regularly in meetings with clients, but I think following COVID, increasingly that tends to be done on Teams and the like, so it is virtual meetings. And so we are able to be very, very flexible in how we work with our clients, but how we work as a team as well. Also, because of what we do, it's an odd industry bidding. Most organisations of any size need to bid for things, but it's still sort of regarded as quite a niche industry. And when we're trying to find people to fulfil our roles and our vacancies, we're based in Leeds in the UK, but we want to look as broadly as possible. We want to attract the best possible people we can. And so as a result of that, we have continued to operate a hybrid model. So people have the ability to work remotely and flexibly, but we do try and get people into the office a couple of times a week, and we all try and come in on the same days every week to help instill that real team ethos and support the culture. Also, when people do join us, we've got a really strong focus on their personal development. And whilst, of course, elements of that can be done remotely, we do find actually developing people is far easier and far better when they are in a room together, where you're able just to look over the desk and ask a question, jump out and have a quick meeting face to face. So we do find the hybrid model works very, very well for us.
Is your team based in the Leeds area then?
Some are. Some people are up to about an hour and a half away. So those in the UK, we have some people in the team based up in Newcastle, some over in the northwest, sort of Manchester and Stockport area. So yes, it varies, and depending on the traffic, it can obviously take varying amounts of time to get in. But again, we've also positioned our offices very close to the train station. Again, to make it as easy for people and as flexible for people, if they do want to come in, they have a choice on how they go about doing that.
Going back to when you started out in, broadly speaking, in sales, you glanced past a comment that was like, back in those times, they would invest in. Can you explain that? What is it that they were doing then that they're perhaps not doing now?
I mean, we've seen this across many industries. I think many organizations at that point in time weren't necessarily under the same financial constraints and pressure that they are now. Margins were better. I was working within an IT industry that was still fairly new. Elements of it were maybe a bit of a black heart, and customers would pay a premium because we knew things that they didn't. Over the years, these industries have become increasingly commoditized. There's far more competition, and pricing naturally has been pushed down. So organizations have less time and less money to be investing in the development of people. And I suppose, very fortunate that at that point in time, there was a huge amount of development and investment. So I attended an awful lot of training, developed a lot of skills that we do find just isn't present. Now, we've got a really strong, as an organisation, we have a really strong focus on development. We want people to come in, but we want them to stay. We want them to improve. We, on a monthly basis, we have monthly reviews with people to talk about how they're progressing, what else we can do to help support them. We have personal development plans. Every 6 months, we assess how they are performing, not in terms of any issues, but see their development, and we review their pay accordingly. And the better they do, the more they get paid. And, it's very objective and very, very clear. So we want to take people on a bit of a journey. So whilst we are an organisation that helps people win tenders, we are trying to develop very well-rounded business professionals, because it helps us as a business, but also makes the job far more interesting for those individuals as well, and they're more inclined to want to stay and be part of the journey that we're on.
Your background in IT and mathematics, was it common to follow your pathway, or did people go to numerous different directions after?
It was probably maybe common to start the early part of my journey, I suppose. Anyone doing IT at that point, I'm sure, ended up in a variety of IT organisations, whether it was as technical individuals or project managers or sales professionals. On the maths side, there's obviously a lot of flexibility there. It ended up being in engineering. A number of people would have gone on to further education as well. I suppose what is particularly unusual about my journey is then making that leap into actually doing a business that involves an awful lot of writing. Just after I graduated, the idea of doing writing every day and helping people write, I couldn't think of anything probably less appealing at that point in time. But we all go through sort of a journey in our careers, and I learned an awful lot. I embraced it. I enjoyed it. I mean, one of the things that's really appealing about tendering and bidding is you're in competition with other people, and it's a real buzz. You're trying to write compelling narrative that's going to get your customer excited and want them to select you. It's the culmination of a long sales process that not only is it just about the written word, it's about you putting yourself out there and the relationship you have. Getting to the end of that is something that I've really enjoyed and found hugely fulfilling.
With regards to the writing then, was there a sort of a eureka moment for you, or was it something that sort of gradually occurred to you? You mentioned that you benefited greatly from lots and lots of PD over the years, but you've said it wasn't something that came naturally to you initially. Was there a sort of a light bulb moment? How did that come about?
I suppose in the early part of my career, I was regularly doing tenders or participating or contributing to them. And I think I would share it, because what you don't want to do is produce a document and just give it to the customer. You want to get review from your colleagues and others. And I would often get an awful lot of constructive, helpful feedback, which at first you might take slightly personally, but then you sort of realise ultimately it's about helping me and helping the organisation I work for produce better bids. And I found over time I was getting less feedback, and as I was improving, I was beginning to enjoy it more. And I think going through that process, made me realise actually this isn't that bad. And then when I identified within the healthcare industry that potential opportunity, yeah, it was appealing from a business idea perspective, but knowing it was going to be initially just me and I would be the one doing a lot of the work, sort of the hands-on work, didn't cause me any concern or angst. But I think another important part that's just sort of worth reiterating that I learnt in the early stages was also the importance of getting feedback and challenge from other people. I would never, and I've made a conscious point of this in my business, I don't want to be surrounded by people who are yes men. I don't want to be surrounded by people who have exactly the same outlook as me. Yes, there needs to be commonality. You want professional people that are hardworking and do things to a really high standard. But you actually want to be surrounded by people with different views, different experiences, because it's the challenge that they provide that help you as an individual and help your business thrive.
If you're working for you or somebody like you, and your boss says, "Oh, I really want to hear what you've got to say." Sometimes people hear this from a boss and then they speak openly or they speak honestly, and then they find either they get outright criticized for it or somehow there's some kind of negative consequence down the line. If you're on the I'm not the boss side, I'm an employee, I work for you, how do you strike that balance with constructive criticism, with providing input that perhaps goes against what it is that the boss is suggesting or the boss is saying, without alienating the boss and making it constructive?
We always, throughout every interview process, make it very clear that when people join, we want them to be asking questions and challenging us. We're not arrogant enough to think that the way we do it is perfect. It's been honed over the years, and we always want that feedback and challenge. And when people join, we, on a monthly basis, have reviews, and one of the agenda items is people's feedback to us. So it is always welcome and it's always encouraging. We have quarterly forums as well, where as part of that, there is actually one of the agenda items there is anonymous feedback. So there is a mailbox people can send stuff to that is anonymous. We obviously want it to be professional, but we want it to be constructive, where we're inviting people to give their thoughts and things, and we ask to get visibility of that maybe a week before the meeting so we can actually reflect on it and come back with something meaningful on that particular topic. I get in some organisations it may be said but it's not meant, but certainly in ours, absolutely it is meant, and members of the team have come up with some fantastic ideas that have allowed us to hone and tweak the process and deliver even more value back to our clients. So we'd always welcome it. I mean, clearly, if they come and ask the same question 5 times, you might keep giving them the same answer. You might want to suggest that we don't need to revisit it again. But generally, people take the feedback on board and will ask better questions, different questions, or when they understand the rationale for why we have gone down a particular route, they're sort of accepting of that and move on.
Okay. If you had to sort of label what it is that you do, what are you? Are you a consultant?
I suppose at a very high level, yes, we're a consultancy business. I suppose if you want to get slightly more granular, bidding and business development consultancy, I guess. But we get used in a whole range of different ways, because when we've built up that trust with clients, they tend to see the skill sets that we have and get us involved in all sorts of different things. So actually for a number of our clients, almost flipped it around, and we actually help some organisations procure. So we get involved in actually writing tender documentation, specifications, the questions, the criteria, almost taking the experience we have of seeing good and bad, actually making sure that these customers' procurement documentations don't fall foul of those things, and what goes out is credible, really concise, unambiguous, and is easy for the various bidders to respond to.
It's interesting because you said that a lot of what you're focused on when you're looking for people to work in your team come from backgrounds, academic backgrounds that people wouldn't naturally associate with the consultancy class. I mean, I think a lot of engineering graduates and maths graduates and stuff, perhaps, but history and English literature and so on, perhaps that wouldn't be the first thought.
No, but I suppose it's the ability to write. I mean, ultimately, we are looking at people's CVs. We always provide a task during the interview process to see how maybe analytical they are, attention to detail, their writing ability. So if there were individuals that had an interest in it that comes from a more scientific background, absolutely we're open. if they completed the task in a good manner to a high standard, and we felt culturally they were a really good fit, then absolutely they're individuals that we would be interested in. But you can see why people naturally who have done the more writing-based degrees would find this sort of avenue of more interest or more appealing potentially.
I find inevitably in these conversations I'm having with people from completely different professional backgrounds that AI comes up. The thought of the impact of AI in the work that you do, how you use it as a tool in perhaps in a positive way, harnessing AI, and perhaps how maybe you view it as a threat or something that undermines the kind of work that you do. Can you reflect on that?
Yes, yeah, as you said, like every industry, there is an AI presence within bidding. I think it's quite an interesting situation at the moment. So we've utilised some AI tools really just to see what they're capable of and how they can potentially contribute and assist our organisation and our customers. I think at the moment where it's very valuable is if you're able to upload your bid library, so effectively your previous content to it, and then you're embarking on a new bid, what it can do is search that previous content really quickly and identify what relevant content you have. So there's often a lot of time spent by the people writing the answers having to search back through previous work. So that can be done very quickly and saves an awful lot of time. What we are finding though is if you are then using AI to write your answers, because often they're very nuanced, they need to be very bespoke to the client. There are some human aspects to how you need to present your answers to make it easy for the evaluators. You need to consider all the requirements, the evaluation criteria. There's a lot of complexity to it. If you submit a bid that's purely based on AI at the moment, you're probably not going to win. So absolutely, there's still a really important role that organisations like ours need to fulfil to make sure you are really maximising the scoring around your bids. Clearly, AI will improve, so it'll be interesting to see where it progresses. But absolutely, for the foreseeable future, there's a really strong need for human involvement in that bid production process. I think what's interesting though is if you sort of look going forward, if you sort of follow this to its logical conclusion and the point where AI is so good it produces fantastic responses, you then find yourself in this rather odd position that every bidder produces a fantastic quality response, and therefore how do you pick the winner? It almost certainly ends up coming entirely down to price, which is not what anyone wants. So whether the buying organisations would ever allow that to happen, we'll have to wait and see. We have started seeing in some procurements actually they're asking whether you've used AI to support the development of your answers. Now, what they haven't done is said whether that's a positive or a negative thing. They're just trying to maybe gather information at this point. Because what's odd about bidding is, if you remember, that what you're doing is you are submitting a response to try and articulate how suitable you are. But actually, the winner is the organisation that is the best at answering questions at a competitive price. It's not necessarily the organisation that is actually best at delivering what the customer needs. Okay, and so there's this sort of slight disjoint. But yeah, if you end up in this odd position that everyone produces a quality bid, I don't know if that's an endpoint that everyone would want, really.
For a young person who's perhaps in the middle of or approaching the end of their undergraduate degree and they're thinking about a career in consultancy, are there any pointers that you would highlight, things that you would suggest, or avenues that they should explore on a path towards a career in consultancy?
Okay, so I think certainly there's a lot of the bigger national and global consultancies do an awful lot in terms of, work placements and the like, graduate schemes. So there's that. I think under the banner of consultancy, there are so many different types of consultancy. So it's trying to understand actually what is your interest, what is your passion, what are the areas and topics that are going to get you enthused and excited and out of bed. Now, clearly, whatever you start doing at the beginning of your career doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to do at the end of it, but we're all going to be working for, 30, 40, even potentially more years than that. So you want something that is going to be enjoyable and stimulating and something that is hopefully you can be passionate about. In terms of consultancy, though, obviously, often as a result of the consultancy, you're going to have to write. Even if it's in a scientific area, you're going to still need to be able to write stuff. So that's going to be an important skill. But also having strong interpersonal skills is incredibly important. You're trying to build up a rapport with clients. You're often trying to extract information out of them. It's something I was taught as a sales professional. So questioning techniques, even if something as basic as open and close questions and using them in an appropriate manner, is going to be really, really important. So yeah, I think there's a range of different sort of skills and areas they can try and focus on. But it's obviously a very different job market than it was when I started many years ago.
Richard, you've been very generous with your time, and I really appreciate you being with us today. Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.